Good morning, everyone. My name's Kevin. I'm going to formally introduce myself here in a moment, but welcome to Crafting Strategic Visual Stories. And today we are going to learn how to become better storytellers, but strategic. Now, there are 4 modules as part of our program. I'm going to just quickly walk through each module right now. Our first module is the power of visual storytelling. It's our foundational module that explores why storytelling matters. And in our first module, I'm going to introduce a framework. And it's used by all great storytellers. It's a framework that you can leverage when you create your stories. And then in Module 2, we're going to take a walk in your audience's shoes. In Module 2, I'm going to introduce a tool called the Visual Story Planner that you will use to organize your story. And then in Module 3, after lunch, we're going to explore your one key takeaway. We call that your big idea. And then finally in Module 4, we're going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to dive back into the Visual Story Planner, and you are going to build out and ultimately visualize your story. Now, a couple housekeeping notes. It is a highly experiential training, so should you step away, if you have to take a phone call, please come and see me so I can make sure that you are caught up. There'll be periods during our training where we are going to be working on your computers, but I would ask you for the time being, close your laptops. I'll direct you when we do want to open them. So my name's Kevin Campbell with the presentation company, and that's a really good picture of me. Don't hold me to that standard. As the day goes on, I mean, the hair is going to get messed up, the bags are going to start to develop, and that was a team of people working on me, hair and makeup, Photoshop, the whole deal. But I do come from the presentation company. We are based in Portland, Oregon. And before I was with the presentation company, I was a Nike global trainer. So I was doing trainings throughout North America, South America. Part of why I really love the material and I really love this training is storytelling's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. And it's really fun for me to take everything I've learned about storytelling and put it into your world at HP. So with that said, I want to kick things off here and get into our first module, the power of visual storytelling. And this is the foundational module, really to explore why storytelling matters. So all of you have a pen in front of you and also some sticky notes. Share one idea per sticky around what makes a great story. Think back to maybe your favorite book, your favorite TV show. You can have one sticky, you can have 3 stickies, 5 stickies. After you feel like you're at a point where you're finished writing, you can join me up front, and we're going to start to stick our thoughts here up on this whiteboard, create an affinity diagram. Pause for a moment as you're coming up here and see if some of the ideas you have are similar to your colleagues, and we'll start grouping them together. If you feel like one maybe needs to move a little bit, and stay up here as well after you've finished. So we'll get a few more of these up here, and then we'll discuss. Great. All right, a lot of really good ideas around storytelling. So this seems like our largest bucket. So let's examine this first. So we've got characters, relatable characters, interesting characters, resonates with the audience, relatable character, something you care about. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
There's always one child.
Its own bucket right here. Javier bucket right here. We'll circle that one. Yeah. So it seems like we've got a lot of stuff in this first bucket. I'm even going to go here around character, right? And I would absolutely agree that characters connect us to really great stories. We can see ourselves in those characters. We can see our family. Maybe it's our mother, our father. We can see the relationships we have. Characters create that emotion and allow us to connect to stories. So I would absolutely agree. Characters deserves its own bucket. Here we've got humor, interwoven humor, excitement, memorable, laughter. I'm going to call this bucket emotion. And really great stories make us feel. We laugh, we cry, but it's certainly present in all great stories as far as emotion's concerned. Style of the presenter, presenter's empathy, presenter relating to their audience. Let's call this delivery. And I should be clear, the material that we're going to cover today, I'm not going to teach you presentation strategy like stand like this, talk like this, gesture like this. But what we find so often is that the material that we create during presentations does not support us, right? We're almost competing with that information, or it's distracting for the audience. And it becomes really hard for us to tell a story when we're just dumping information on a slide, when there's 10 different messages on a slide, 3 graphs on a slide. I will show you an approach that will make it a lot easier for you to present and more excited for you to present your material, and it'll be easier on the audience. So often we create presentations, we're forcing our audience to work so hard to understand our message. So that's how we're going to really tackle delivery, on learning how to create a tool that will really help you become a better presenter. All right. I appreciate the one person that said visuals down here, because it is crafting strategic visual stories. So I appreciate that one, someone including visuals down there. Javier tells incredible stories.
No, the second one, secret emotions and goes to emotions.
It's the Javier section. Emotions goes here. Attention of the audience.
Emotions go probably to the left.
Oh, you know, I was putting in the character group. Let's put that right there. It's like a flow chart now. It's going to be interesting. All right, let's go down here. We got suspense, conflict, unexpected moments. I love that. Unexpected conclusions, suspense, tension. I'm going to call this bucket, let's call it conflict. If you think about great stories, there's always a conflict, right? There's the hero trying to overcome some obstacle. There's always conflict. If there's no conflict, you end up being kind of bored, right? It's like, you know, why bother learning about this story if there's no conflict? So I would agree, conflicts create good stories. And then here we've got a good punchline, a message, right structure or flow. You know what? I like that. Let's call it structure. Really great stories have a beginning, they have a middle, they have an end. I think sometimes when we create presentations, we're jumping to the end or we're jumping to the middle. But how do we create a story and have structure to our presentation? So this is great. We've got delivery, we've got emotions, visuals, conflict, you know, the hobby section, structure. But I'm excited because you're absolutely going to create great stories today. So I'm excited about including you on this. And also characters. So great, excellent job. All right, everyone have a seat for me, please. It's pretty clear everybody in here does know a thing or two about storytelling, which is going to make my life a lot easier here today. But really, why is that? Why is it that we already know about storytelling? And it really is because people connect through stories. Whether at bedtime, around the fire, at the dinner table. I know for myself growing up, I had a U.S. history picture book, and I would point to an image. My dad would tell me all about that moment in time. And it really is because storytelling is in our DNA. If you think about it, on your phones with your Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, we're literally sharing our lives through stories, right? But somewhere along the way, I don't think that element will really ever change. But the one thing that has changed pretty drastically, especially in the world of business, is the manner in which we're telling stories. And this may look familiar to some of you. We seem to just fire hose our audience with data, right? See some smiles, some eyes, some pointing in the room right here. Stats, analytics, charts. We pack as much information as we can into our slides and as much data as we can into our slides, right? Now, I'm not here to say that data is wrong, that data is bad. You need data. Data is crucial. Data provides clarity. Data provides insight. But the problem is when we over-rely on data, it actually becomes paralyzing to the audience, and it's not engaging. Whereas in story, on the other hand, now story captures that attention. Story inspires change. And it's really because story appeals to our right brains, where we imagine the possibilities, where we dream, use our emotions. Data appeals to our left brain, logic and reason. So the magic is, in a world where our attention spans are shorter, we take our data and we wrap it in a story. Now, cognitive psychologist Jerome Bruner says we are 22 times more likely to remember that fact if we wrap it in a story. I'll quiz you on that later. Some of you want to jot that down somewhere. But 22 times more likely to remember that fact when we wrap it in a story. So when it comes to being heard by executives or any audience, it's a great way to be heard and to cut through the noise. Now, you'll also hear me say this, that storytelling without the visuals is only half of the story, because it's important for your audience to see and visualize what you want them to know or do. And not just visuals up on the screen, for instance, but being able to tell a story where you create visuals in the mind of the audience. So we're going to put your storytelling to practice right now. And we're going to create a 1-minute visual story. So here in a moment, working as a team, you're going to go over here and you're going to select at least one photo per person. You are going to practice and develop your team's 1-minute story. And it's not 1 minute per photo, but it's 1 minute, a cohesive story using all of the photos. You'll have 10 minutes to practice it, and all team members must be part of the storytelling process. So again, you'll have time as a team, go over, select your photos, at least 1 photo per person, practice your 1 minute cohesive story using those photos, and then you come up here. Each person has to be part of the presenting. Have fun with this as well. It doesn't have to be an HP story. It can be something totally unrelated to an HP story. You know, a diva story, you know, whatever you want, Nick. It's your story. Have fun with this. Any questions before we?
Yeah, how many people on a team?
It's going to be about, we'll probably do about 3 to 4 people per team. Sound good? Yeah, any other questions? So let's go ahead and go for the first group. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go ahead and go with 5 here with Eric. So this is going to be 1 team here. Starting with Javier. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with Karen. And our last group here. 1, 2, 3, 4, Maria. So 3 groups. You have 10 minutes. Go over here. Select your photos. At least 1 photo per person. If you want to have more, you can. But at least 1 photo per person. You'll have 10 minutes to rehearse your story. If you want to switch out photos, you can. It's up to you. Or you can keep the photos you selected. It's your story. You can choose how to tell it however you want. But you have to have at least 1 photo per person. If you want to have more, you can.
Can either start with the turtle or end.
Too far, we started destroying the land, we build
To
this
build all these highways.
and build all these highways.
Uplifting story here. I'm excited to cry this early in the day.
So you want to start with
Got about 4 minutes left.
Cleared all of our
About 2 minutes left to finish practicing your story.
and after there weren't any resources.
I just know I'm at the end of that.
We started using our.
I'm excited to hear these stories. There's some promise of maybe Eric singing could be in our future. We'll see how it works. There was some death and destruction. One of the groups was talking about some wine. I was at a training the other day and I saw somebody cue up the Rocky theme song and they played it when they were done. So it's totally unpredictable. We'll see what happens. But before we share our stories, I am curious what your experience was like crafting these 1-minute stories. What was the process that you went through coming up with your stories? So from the 3 groups, I'd love to hear from at least 1 person per group to see what the process of this was like for you. Or if there are any parallels you can draw from this activity and your work at HP when you collaborate together to create presentations. I see some heads nodding, so yeah, some feedback.
First, we started a random pickup of a couple of photos, and then we tried to correlate those, and then looked around what would go with them,
Okay.
and then built a story.
Okay. So then got the photos first, and then built a story based on the
Yeah,
photos.
so a couple of photos, tried to come up with a theme, and then looked for the related photos.
I see. Okay. So kind of a hybrid. Grabbed a couple photos, prompted the story, then you went back and pulled in additional photos that supported the story. Great. The other 2 groups?
We tried a couple different storylines and tried practicing it, and then we're like, oh, let's swap some of those around, and that tells a better story. So we kind of iterated once we got the basics.
Now, did you swap them out in terms of or you mean within the team? Got it. Great. Great. Excellent. And our other team here, what was your process? Tell me a little about your process there.
We spent some time sequencing, right? So who's first, second, third, which picture makes sense. Did some flip-flops depending on as the story evolved.
And we swapped out a couple.
Swapped out a
photos
couple.
that weren't quite
Didn't
fitting
make
the
the
narrative that we were
right.
building.
How about the parallels to your world at HP? How many of you share slides around, share decks around? Is that a common practice? And then are you trying to be like, all right, I've got these 3 slides. How do I fit these into my presentation? Is that something that you deal with?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Which can become challenging to tell a story when you're pulling in these visuals, seeing where they fit, or how many of us fall in love with certain visuals, whether that's a chart or a graph or a picture, and then we're like, all right, regardless of what happens, I know I'm keeping this in my presentation, right? So part of our approach today is going to be, maybe looking at storytelling a different way. So, all right, do I have a group that would like to share their story first? Not everybody, oh great, okay, this group right here, I love it. So while you're coming up to the front of the room, everybody else grab a white card in front of you and your marker, and as you are listening to this story, you're gonna write down at least one thing you remember from, I'm gonna call this team 3. So at least one thing you remember from team 3's story. Now, can I also ask for a volunteer to keep track of my time? Because we do have a minute total. Karen, excellent. So should you hear the timer, it's more of an Academy Awards timer where it's a signal to start wrapping it up. It's not gonna be the showtime at the Apollo timer where somebody comes and pulls you off stage.
What do you guys all see in this picture? Which animal?
Horse.
So this is an animal, a horse, whose legs are tied, hungry to eat this food, which is far from this animal. It is correlated to all our lives every day today. We want to deliver so much. We are tied up in our calendars or other stuff, but we are unable to deliver. We want to do so much as a team, but each one of us are individually tied into our own day-to-day activities. So we are unleashing this animal to get to what this animal is interested in.
Yes, here we go. We are sky is the limit. We are skydiving free. We're holding each other as a team still, having fun, swing up. Then here we go to the river rafting.
They land in the river and they work together as a team to still do the river, do all the obstacles that they encounter on a river ride, till they actually get to a point where they land and they're ready to move on to the next.
With all these activities, we won the championship as a team. We're all together, we're one, we have a goal, we met it. And because we met that goal, we're gonna celebrate with cheese. There's no wine card, so I totally, he's liking the wine, but we're gonna celebrate and celebrate together our goal.
Great, round of applause, thank you so much. There are worse ways to celebrate than wine and cheese, I like that. So again, for everyone listening there, at least one thing you remember about Team 3's story on your card. And I'll give you just a moment. All right, Team 2 in the back. So I'm losing my timer with Karen, so I'll have to ask Beskar. Great, thank you. So again, same thing, as you're listening, either during or afterwards from the two teams here, at least one thing you remember about Team 2's story. And whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, once upon a time, life was going on slowly on Earth, and animals were living well.
And then came man, and he had higher aspirations and tried to reach for the stars and to plan his future.
So he started to use Earth's natural resources to build amazing things.
We started building amazing infrastructure and communication networks and technology and all these type of great things.
But then it didn't work out.
Wow.
We went too far.
All right, yeah, morbid. It was morbid, but nice job. Have a seat. Wow, makes me think about my life right there. Jeez. Yeah. All right, all of us can recover emotionally, and we'll have Team 1 come on up. All right.
So this is the story of us, a team dealing with the daily stresses of traffic and life in the Bay Area, and dealing with zero-based budgeting and all of the pleasures we deal with here at HP. So we decided we needed to get away and have a break.
Yeah, so we got a map, picked one of the smallest islands we could find out in the middle of the ocean, kind of looked around and said, this is where we want to go, this is how we're going to get away.
Right, but of course to get there, because we picked this really small remote island, we weren't going to be able to just take an airplane and land there. So we all decided what we would do is charter a skydiving plane, and we'd fly out to the island and jump down to the island on parachutes.
And we got really close, but we missed. So we spent a couple of days surfing the waves, kind of trying to make it towards this island, and we finally made it together. We stayed together, we had our stuff, but I think we started to get towards the island, and
So So then we get to the island, we finally get to be together, we finally get to relax in a hammock, and we finally got our getaway that we tried to get all of us from the traffic to the island.
Excellent. Round of applause. Nice job. Sorry. I needed a, you know, a pick-me-up after the last one, so I needed that. Thank you, Team 1. We're here for you. So again, feedback on Team 1's story, at least one thing you remember. So hold on to your feedback, because we are definitely going to get to the feedback you have for Teams 1, 2, and 3. But thinking about this idea of storytelling in business and this, you know, concept of telling a visual story. Who are some people in the world of business, dead or alive, that do this really well, that can you know, stand up here and tell a story and really make it impactful? Who are some of those names, dead or alive? Who comes? Steve Jobs. Thank you. I'll pay you on the break right here for cueing my next slide. Do you have PayPal, or do we need to do a cash transaction, or anyone else though? Elon Musk. Yeah, Elon Musk. Absolutely.
So within HP, I was just sharing last night that Chandrakant did he's very visual and was just did his CV in a visual way, which is pretty compelling.
Great.
He took our class.
Oh, okay.
We'll take credit for it. Yeah. Any other examples? Anyone else come to mind? Really good ones? I'd be remiss if I did a storytelling workshop and I did not talk about Steve Jobs. Part of me thinks I need to show up here in the black turtleneck and the white shoes, because he was a master at storytelling, right, of really making it look effortless. Now, if you've read any of the books on Steve Jobs or seen any of the movies, you know it was really hard to get him to the stage, but when he was up there, it was just effortless. So I want to take you back in time here, back to 2007, and I want to show you just part of the iPhone release video. Now, it was a much longer video. I'm only going to show you a couple minutes. But I want you to pay special attention to how Steve Jobs used storytelling to engage his audience. If you have room on the white card, you were putting your feedback, then I would ask you just as you're watching this to jot down some notes, or if you want to grab a new white card on the table, you can. But how does Steve Jobs use storytelling to engage his audience?
Today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device. So, 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone.
So again, how does Steve Jobs use storytelling to engage his audience? What did you write down?
One of the big things is structure here, right? He puts this big setup at the beginning, right, to lead you off on a certain path that he wants you to walk down.
Great.
Right, and then wants you to come back to his actual point.
He's not telling you everything, right? He's kind of leading you on this journey, and you're slowly in your mind beginning to start put the pieces together. You know, like he doesn't come out and just say, here's the iPhone, click here, all the features of the iPhone, right? He tells this story that creates some tension and really pulls you in. Yeah. What else?
He was magnifying the things which were already in the market to highlight. Everyone knows that a phone need to be a phone. Before that, BlackBerry was already there.
Mm-hmm.
It was already having the data communication, and there was other things where things could be stored for. So he was highlighting which was already there in a magnification so that people catch that. And
Yeah.
the other thing that came to my mind is repeatedness, which usually say if you keep repeating that, it's stuck in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he did.
Absolutely. He was a master at something called the rule of three, which really manages cognitive load. Anybody familiar with the rule of three? Yeah, talk a little bit about the rule of three, if you will, please.
I only know that if you say anything 3 times, it gets registered in your unconscious mind repeatedly,
Yeah.
so that you don't need to think to bring it back to your memory. It just registers there.
It manages cognitive load, really, where we as people can't remember more than 3 things at once. So if as we create our presentations, and we saw that up here, he was clear with the 3 devices that then became 1. Other feedback.
Part of the structure of it, it's conclusion, affirmation makes you feel smart, right? And so if he leads you to that information and you come to the conclusion and then he says it, oh, I must be smart, I must have come to that,
Yeah.
right, independently. And of course he led you down that path, but it was certainly not a setup, but a setup in a way that made you feel good about coming to that.
Yeah, a really, really well said point there, that he's not giving you the answers, he's almost giving you all the tools and you're coming up with the answer, so you feel more inclined to really, trust or believe whatever at the end that he's going to come and say. How about the visuals? What were some things you noticed about the visuals? Simple, yeah. Talk a little bit about the visuals.
So he didn't present any text or PowerPoint, just 3 pictures, right, of the 3 devices.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, really, just one, so it's easier for people to just visually understand.
Yeah. I talked about this here when we were talking about that activity. I mean, how often do we just cram our slides with text, data, bullet points? How simple were those visuals? It was very easy for the viewer to be able to, the audience, to connect with those, to understand and not get lost in the message and not have to choose between, should I listen to the speaker or do I try to read all this information and read all this data? It was aligned, the visuals were supporting him. Any other comments about that?
I thought that one thing is really good in terms of his pacing and his material is that he was matching the emotion of the audience, right? So he would have given a very different presentation if it was a skeptical audience of Wall Street analysts who wanted to know, what's the money end of this, right? He was there with a hyped up audience who was already excited, and so he was sort of managing that.
Great. And we have a whole module on audience, which is really, it's the one thing you need to consider, because you're absolutely right. How he shared that story would have changed depending on who's in that room. So for us, we need to be very clear on who are we presenting to and what are their needs, and then design our presentation around a way to connect to that particular audience. Yeah, excellent point. Steve Jobs, like all great storytellers, he uses a framework, and I talked about this up front, that I was going to share this with you. And this is really the foundation of the training that we're going to do today. I'm going to give you all a handout that has this on here, so if you'd like to take notes, you can. If you want to just listen, that's also fine as well. So there are 4 signposts for sharing a great story. And I'm going to share these with you. This is not anything that we have made up. This is a time-tested storytelling framework. But part of the exciting thing about today is I'm going to show you how to take this time-tested storytelling framework and apply it to the presentations you create at HP to create impactful stories. So there's 4 signposts of a great story. Our first signpost is setting. Now, if we think about setting in stories traditionally, it's usually physical place, right? I was at this particular location. In the business context, setting looks a little bit different. Setting is all about providing context for your audience. So often in our presentations, we're jumping midstream, half of the audience is lost. Setting is the time in which in your story you're pulling in some data, talking about some trends, and talking about the world that you're in when it comes to this particular topic. So again, setting is all about providing context for your audience. Our next signpost are characters. And there are a number of ways to introduce character in your presentation. And I'm just going to tell you a couple, and I'm going to show you some examples in some real-life business presentations throughout the course of today. Now you can have the named character. So meet Joe, meet Bob, meet Steve, and then you tell the audience a little bit about that character, and then you relate them to a larger group, a broader group that your audience is able to connect with. So introduce Bob, and then you can talk about it. There are thousands of people all over the world just like Bob that want secure print solutions. So we have that hook to be able to get in with the audience through that named character. You humanize the topic, you relate it to the broader context. You see that a lot of times with politicians, where they're in a certain state and they say, I was on the road talking to Jane, and there's thousands of Jane all over the world. So that's the named character, and you're also able to go broad, and then you're able to go very specific to that named character, talking about that there's millions of people all over the world that care about X, Y, Z, millions of people like Bill. So that's the named character. There is also the unnamed character. Millennials, consumers. There's that unnamed character. And then you're also able to put yourself in the story as a character, either sharing a personal story or me or my team. So there's a number of ways to introduce characters. I'm going to show you some examples throughout the course of today on what these look like in a real-life business presentation. But just know that characters is our second signpost. Our third is conflict. I like to say, if there's no conflict, there's no story. Conflict gives us a reason to care. Conflict also allows your audience to know that you understand their issue. You understand their problem. What was the main conflict in our Steve Jobs video, do you think? Who has a guess?
He was trying to address desires of the audience.
What were those desires, though?
A touch iPod. When he said it was really a touch iPod, it's like everybody there was looking for them.
Yeah.
He made people think that there's no such device solving all three problems.
Great.
Right, so managing multiple devices.
Yeah. I get your world. You're over here trying to work out, listening to your iPod. Then you get an email. You got to run over. You got to hop on the internet. You got to. So he's I get your world. I understand it. That's your conflict. Now I give you 3 devices in one. So he wasn't just telling somebody. He wasn't pushing the iPhone, saying you need this. He was sharing some their conflict really, and sharing a solution to their conflict. Now you're able to have one main conflict you resolve, or you could have a series of escalating conflicts that get resolved. But our fourth and final signpost is resolution. And resolution sees your conflict through. It resolves that tension. It resolves that conflict and sees your characters safely through to the end. This is usually going to be the bulk of your presentation, talking about your product, your solution. For the Steve Jobs video, this is the point in which he's talking about the iPhone and the features and the functions. Where do you think that so often we begin our stories in the business world? We begin with setting, characters, conflict, or resolution. What do you think? Possibly yourself, or your colleagues, or just in general, where do you think we usually begin? Yeah. Resolution, right? Talking about ourselves, talking about our product, talking about our service. We don't really usually provide a lot of context, share characters, create that emotional appeal, identify our audience's challenges. We're always just talking about ourselves, right?
Well, and part of it, and maybe you'll touch on this or find a way to work this in, right, ends up being what's required very often is you've got to present the executive summary first, right, which is 90% about resolution. Completely agree with you. There's very little context or other stuff that shows up on that. And we have to do that first because more than likely you're not going to get off that slide. Yep. Right? That audience is going to tie you down, and maybe we'll get into a little bit of this stuff later. So you may have crafted this beautiful whatever, but you're not going to get past executive summary.
I love that you brought up executives, because that is absolutely a whole different animal. I'm going to spend a decent amount of time on what does this framework look like when it comes to executives, because you're absolutely right. If you don't get to the point quickly, you're not going to have time to have a whole big reveal to an executive. So just trust that I'm going there with it. That's a totally different animal. I'm going to show you how we still follow this framework presenting to executives. Excellent point. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because it's an important one to make. So one rule that I'm going to talk about right now, that I'm going to introduce, as we talked about, so often we're starting here. Hi, welcome. We're starting in the resolution of the story, which is all about us, all about our features, all about our products. So the general rule that I'm going to give you is setting, characters, and conflict can come in any order, but they must come before the resolution. So possibly you want to share some conflict to create some tension, draw the audience in, then provide some context and introduce characters they care about, then move into the resolution. Setting, characters, and conflict can come in any order. Another thing, it's not like you necessarily need one slide for setting, one slide for characters, one slide for conflict. These can be combined. So you could have a slide for setting and characters, 2 or 3 slides for conflict, then you get to resolution. You could have one slide that has your setting, characters, and conflict before getting to the resolution. You could verbally share setting, characters, and conflict with your first slide getting to the resolution. You might not even have slides. But in your organizing your talk this way, I'm going to provide some context. Who are the characters? What's the conflict? What's the solution? So there's a number of ways that we can implement this. I'm going to show you throughout the course of today what this looks like in different contexts, presenting to executives, in different audiences. How do we take this framework and apply it? Questions, comments, thoughts on our framework?
One challenge that I plus one to Chris's, I frequently run into that challenge where you don't get past slide 1 if you don't just jump to the resolution with the executive. So that's been a challenge.
Absolutely.
The other challenge I often have is having a very diverse audience and being able to speak concisely and draw in all of those audiences in a single presentation. So
Absolutely.
That's another challenge.
I appreciate all those challenges for sure, and they're tough. And then I would just say know that I'm going there with the material we're going to cover today and how we address multiple audiences, and certainly how we present to executives, because I know it's a priority in the conversations with Christina. It's about how do we take all this information and present it to executives. That's certainly something that we'll cover here today. You're now going to return to your groups, and you're going to first identify, did you have all 4 of our signposts in the 1-minute visual story that you told? Then you're going to assess the strengths of the signpost. How well developed were they? How effective were they in advancing your story? Don't necessarily redo the story. I'm not asking you to do that. Just assess your story through the lens of our 4 signposts, and then you're going to choose a spokesperson that's going to share the feedback with the group. And I'll actually have you on this group right here so you can kind of listen to their debrief.
Thank you.
Excellent. All right, so you will have 3 minutes, teams 1, teams 2, and teams 3. Assess your story through the lens of our 4 signposts.
It's like cognitive dissonance. Like I was expecting it to go here, and now it went there.
Yeah. Eric's right, because the moment we jump on,
We had all of those Yeah. We're not trying to sell something.
For 60 seconds.
All right, let's go ahead and start with our first group here. If you could hold up your photos, please, so we can see them. Remind your colleagues of your story. And for everyone else, pull out those cards that you jotted your notes down on with the things you remembered about Team 3's story. And before I ask the spokesperson to share, I'd like to get some feedback from your colleagues on the things you remembered about Team 3's story.
It was about teamwork.
Teamwork?
Teamwork wins the cheese.
Teamwork. I like that. So, could be on a T-shirt or like a mug, I almost feel like. Teamwork wins the cheese.
It's about the need to be set free from something.
Yeah, the image of being tied up and hungry was, I think, a powerful image.
Powerful, yeah. Great. Who's our spokesperson? All right, and Bhaskar?
Yeah, so going to the signposts, we had all the 4 signposts in our story. We started with the conflict, and then we did the setting. This is what is happening in our day-to-day activities and all. And then we introduced the characters as a team. This is the team, this is what we need to do. And finally, we had the resolution that if we do this, then we will win the championship and have fun.
Great. I really appreciated something that I've actually never seen facilitating this class, and I've done a fair amount of these trainings, but you started off asking a question to your audience to get that participation. And part of what we'll talk about is the strength of, at times in your presentation, having that question to engage the audience. And also, so often when we present, we're focused on our monologue, essentially. We're just sharing information. Do we take the time to interact with our audience? We take the time to ask questions. I thought that was really good. Yeah, I think you guys had all of your signposts. Just one opportunity, as I talk about characters in a story, I think something you could have done, it's not a wrong, because you absolutely did it right, is, tell us a little bit about that horse there, his name, maybe his challenge. So we're pulled in a little bit more. He's got a name, here's his challenge, and then, like all of us, he feels tied. He feels tethered. He feels, constrained throughout the course of the day. So then suddenly taking it to a little bit of a, deeper level with us understanding that horse, a name, a challenge, then we step back and we say, like all of us, he's constrained. And then I think at the end, it would have been fun to bring the horse back. So now, through doing X, Y, Z, he's free. He's free. He's now able to go out in the world and experience the things that he wanted to experience. And, all of us can really be like this horse if we free ourselves, right? Just, opportunity there. Not anything wrong, because yours was kind of, we were the characters. But I think having a chance to go a little deeper on that name character, because, I think Jen, she brought it up, that was a powerful image. And I think we were all connected to that idea. Really, taking us a little bit deeper, I thought could have strengthened the story just a bit. Great. All right. We've got team 1 or team 2. Any volunteers to go next? Maybe team. Okay. Great. So team 1 right here. Hold up your photographs, your images, and everyone else pull out your white cards. And what is the feedback on team 1 on their story?
It was about taking a vacation, but I enjoyed the unexpected drop into the ocean.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was about tenacity, just carrying on.
So team togetherness leading to fun at the end. That's what I.
Great.
Yeah, for me it started as an escape.
Yeah.
And then this overcoming difficulties.
Yeah. Great. Spokesperson? And so, in analyzing our story, we certainly felt like we had, all 4 of those pieces in there, but we felt like both characters in conflict did not get very much development at all in the story. We just sort of introduced, our team, we've got struggles, everybody understands, of course, obviously that it's stressful to live here in the Bay Area and commute. So, of course, we just moved on from there. We could have said a lot more about the characters, about what our real stresses are, why we're at this, breaking point, they're willing to jump out of an airplane to reach an island, kind of thing. At the same time, we also could have built some more conflict into the, because we wanted to do something so unique and different, and we would pick this tiny island, but there was no way to get there. We could have built that, the struggle that we had that ultimately took us to that point of jumping out of an airplane, as opposed to, well, it was a tiny island, and so we jumped out of an airplane to get there, kind of thing.
Great. Absolutely, yeah. I think maybe even sharing us, it's Chris, Jared, and Nick, and we all decided we were really, really stressed out, so we decided to go on a vacation. Like, even giving the names a little bit, I think, could work really well. I think you guys, and you can, correct me if I'm wrong, I think when you guys were kind of putting the story together, you were identifying the conflict around the traffic and around the kind of hustle and bustle. Was that kind of the initial impression? But your story actually was formed in a way where I think that's almost part of the setting, right? That's the context of the world you're in, where the conflict really was the journey to the island, right? As you said. And, really, really good job with the humor. Like, that got a pretty big laugh. It was well delivered. It was well timed in the story. And that was part of the feedback that I wrote down, of really sharing more of that conflict with us around, getting to the island, or maybe the conflict is around jumping in the water. Are there sharks in the water? Is the land close? We were struggling, 3 of us didn't know if we'd survive. Really diving into that part of the conflict a little bit more. And then the more clear we are on our conflict, the easier it is to tie it to the resolution. So we were struggling in this water. There were sharks in the water. We didn't know if we survived, and we saw land. And land was just above the horizon. And we swam there together, and we finally arrived at land. We knew we were safe, and we enjoyed the rest of the evening in this hammock. So the more clear we are there with that conflict, that it is the water, the struggle to get to the island, the easier it is to connect it to the resolution. And again, that's something that we'll think about with our stories. The more clear you are on your conflict, it's going to be easier to resolve it, to tie it to a conflict. If your conflict is kind of high level, then it can be a struggle sometimes with how do I resolve something that's not as clear as it could be. But really fun story, really good images, powerful visuals. And again, I think you guys absolutely had all of the signposts. So excellent job there. All right, group in the back, let's hold up our photos. And let's share your feedback with group 2.
Resolution. They did not work out.
Enough said. Yeah. Other feedback?
I tagged it as the progress question mark of humankind. So.
Unexpected ending.
Yeah, it was unexpected.
Theme of emotion.
Yeah, emotion. Who's our spokesperson?
I guess I was
Jen?
elected.
Yeah.
So we thought that we had identified the 4 signposts, so the setting really just being Earth, and the characters being humanity. I think we didn't identify it kind of personally. It was humanity as a whole, so maybe that's an opportunity to actually personalize the turtle or an individual human. The conflict, we had a conflict. We maybe could have expressed it more poignantly, I don't know, but there was the conflict with Earth and what we were doing to it. And clearly there was a resolution.
Great.
I was also wondering from a conflict perspective, kind of back also to Steve Jobs, like part of the conflict was just your own like cognitive dissonance of like you're expecting to go one way and now you're going another way. So we're like building up towards something that didn't really go the way expected.
Part of the opportunity for your group, and I would agree again, you had all of the signposts. I think Jen, it's a pretty smart observation with maybe, personalizing it might have got it to a little bit of a deeper level. I think that the conflict in the story, for it to end, because all of our stories, whenever we're creating them for HP or anywhere else, we're always going with the end in mind, right? Sometimes people start from the end back, right? They know where they're going, so how do we get there? If the end is death, then I think part of what we could have done in the conflict is maybe talk a little bit more about the scarcity of resources, that we're destroying the planet. So then the more clear we are, again, like I said with this group, the more clear we are on that conflict of the, every year, X amount of the, rainforest is chopped down. I'm not saying you need those stats, but I just mean stuff like that, the more clear we are that we're, heading in this direction. If we don't change today, and then show the image, here's our future. Then suddenly we're having a chance to have this call to action, and we've been pretty clear on this conflict, that because, animals were here first, and now man is coming, and we're farming the land, and we're chopping down trees, and we're depleting the earth of all its resources, and we need to change today, or here's our future. So maybe the more clear we are again on the conflict, we can then tie it to the resolution with our story, because ultimately maybe that would be the meaning of your talk, for instance, if you were just out and about sharing this talk. Does that kind of help address that question in terms of being more clear on that conflict can lead us into a pretty clear resolution? Any questions or comments? So part of the opportunity that I think we're seeing with this is all of us naturally have these 4 elements, right? We naturally had them all in the story. But now being a little bit more intentional, if I went back and I said, okay, now, take another 10 minutes, redo your story, be intentional around these 4 signposts, I think we would see, dramatically 2, 3, 4 times more powerful stories. And it's this point where we're able to take this idea and apply it to our presentations, if we're intentional around these signposts, to create pretty impactful presentations. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing when we return from the break. I'm going to show you some good and some bad stories. So the idea behind these 4 signposts, and we're going to see these 4 signposts in some real-life business presentations. And I'm going to actually put it to you to tell me whether you think these stories are good, effective uses of our storytelling framework, or if they're bad stories, if they're more effective or they're less effective. It's something that we'll do after the break. So you'll have 10 minutes. It is 10:20 right now. Let's say back at 10:30, and we'll examine good versus bad stories. So prior to the break, we examined stories, and I shared a storytelling framework with you. So now we're going to start getting into what does this storytelling framework look like through the lens of real-life business presentation. So here in a moment, I'm going to share a good story and a bad story, and as a group collectively, we're going to dissect that story and examine it through the lens of our 4 signposts. So I first want to introduce a fictitious company here called Nirvana Tech. Now, Nirvana Tech services airport kiosks, so really anything with a illumination screen, you know, baggage claim, arrivals, departures. They schedule 24/7 technician support to be able to service those kiosks. And Alex Fuente is the director of technical support, and he's noticed that there's an issue where the margins are suffering. So he's going to now go, he's going to propose some changes to help the company address these issue of margins that are suffering. So it'd be too easy for me to just walk through this story with you. So what you're going to do is, in a team, you're going to either have Alex's good version of his story or his bad version of the story. So the first thing to do in a team is to open up the slides and order them in a logical flow. So examine it around the lens of, all right, where's my setting? Who are my characters? Where's my conflict? And where's ultimately the resolution? Order them in a logical flow. Then we've got space for team 1, team 2, and team 3 is going to be right here. So if you want to stack your slides on the ledge, you can do that. Tape them up in a logical flow as if you were going to present them. And tape them up left to right here on your work areas. And then use our sticky notes that we have at the table to label the signposts. So where are we in the story? Is this slide setting? Is this slide conflict? Is this slide characters? Then the final step is to choose an Alex Fuente that's going to present this story back to the group. Any questions? All right. So I will count you off. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then all the 1s will be on a team, all the 2s will be on a team, and all the 3s will be on a team. So we'll start with Bill.
1, 2, 3.
1,
2, 3.
1, 3. 1,
2.
3.
2,
3.
Oh, I love even teams. Excellent. Bill, there's your presentation. Jared and Nick, your presentation. So again, the 1s are right here. 2s are right here, 3s are right here. There is tape in the packet for you to tape your slides up. Examine it through the lens of our 4 signposts.
I call him Bob. Okay. And Bob it is.
Yes, because Bob is not getting it.
Oh, this is setting, current compensation,
But I'm
right?
sure tape
Already off.
Some people do. For these because
People are afraid. This before that, because it's talking about margin, and this is a crappy slide, but it talks about how the percentage.
If we can jump this, this,
Yeah, let us do that. No, but go out to the end. So here's our recommendation.
yeah, that would be
Just come in a little bit and let's turn our attention over to Alexandra Fuente that is going to present this story on margin issue repairs.
All right, so we're here today to address our margin issues on repairs. We've noticed that margins have gone down significantly over the past year, and we need to do something to take action. It appears it might be related to our techs out in the field. You can see here, a lot of the technicians are actually scheduling calls for after 8 p.m., even though the calls themselves are coming in early enough that they could do the repair earlier in the day. And this is just generally a trend that has started to occur more drastically in the past year. So perhaps, again, this is more attributed to the new tech team than not. Obviously, I did a lot of homework. Chart. Anyway, so late night repairs, this is clearly still the main point and issue we need to address. You can see with our current compensation structure, we're actually incentivizing to a certain extent that our technicians come in the later hours because we pay higher rates for the later hours. What I'm proposing is that we adjust our compensation so that way it incentivizes the technicians to do it earlier in the day.
Nice job, right?
Take a crap and make
Yeah.
it sound good.
How did you feel?
I felt like I was saying a lot of the same stuff over and over again. And some of this data is way more, you're asking people to read when they're not going to listen as much to what you're saying because they're reading all of this.
You're really putting a lot of pressure on the audience, right, to understand the message. So from the audience's perspective, and here's the story up on the screen if anybody can't see it as well, what are some thoughts from an audience perspective on that? I thought you did an excellent job. I was very impressed with the short amount of time that you grasped the issue here. So really, kudos to you on that. But from an audience perspective, what were some of the things you observed or thought as you were hearing this story? Not everybody at once. Here we have a whole
Lots
8
of,
hours
lots of
together.
data and a lot of redundancy, right? It's the kind of the tell it again, slightly different wording.
Yep. Yeah, from
Especially the slide with the big table.
Look how smart I am.
What are you
I
trying
did my homework.
to tell
You
me
could tell.
exactly?
Yeah. But you know, how often do we see people that did all this work and they want you to know they did all this work, whether you need to know it or not? I'm going to show you I did all this work, right? When it doesn't matter to the audience.
It was a disaster. Everything was everywhere, you know, and characters were almost non-existent in this. So yeah, it was just a disaster from, there was no structure.
I don't think this is atypical though. I mean, there's a lot of presentations that are well-intentioned but follow very similar formats.
And I'll say, as presenting it, I glossed over a lot of the stuff, but I mean, this is talking about the resolution, this is talking about the resolution, this is talking about the resolution.
Yeah.
I kind of just glossed over it to make it better.
I was going to say, you made it actually work a lot better than it actually.
Well, you know what, and you absolutely did. The reason why you did it is you almost disregarded the slides, right? You stepped in front, you're like, I'm just going to tell the story, and occasionally I'll go back and be like, yeah, what I just said, we can see it right here, right?
Really bad slides.
Really bad slides, but how, not everybody is as skilled as you. You're obviously an experienced presenter. I was impressed by this, but there are people where it's not surprising people are scared to present, because what this does is force you to be like, okay, I'm gonna have to just go in and I'm gonna have to tell you the whole story here. And if we get lost, if our mind gets off track, if we get confused, there's nothing on here to pull us back, right? There's nothing to be able for me to click, oh geez, late night repairs, didn't that say that on another slide? I have no idea where I am in the story right now, right? Which is, it's not surprising where people are terrified to present. If I emailed this to you, for instance, and I said, oh, you got to present this tomorrow, I'll send you over the deck, Godspeed. How would you do? You'd struggle, right? And it's not your fault as a presenter.
I have to sleep on it.
You have to sleep on it, yeah. Then what do you think about, we've got key issues, late night repairs, current compensation structure, late night repairs. Does that tell you anything?
Ooh, I like Appendix A. That's
Appendix A? Yeah, very descriptive. But does that tell you what you're supposed to know from this slide? Does that tell you what you're supposed to do? Does that help the presenter know what the key message is on this slide? Talk about that a little bit in terms of an audience perspective, or even you can share your thoughts with staring up and seeing another late night repairs heading.
Even the title is like between these presentations and this one. So
I mean, all I can think of is like, oh, we got the good story.
Thank God we got the good story. Yeah, I think when here in a moment we see the more effective story, we're going to see the difference and how really transformative headline writing can be versus writing headlines. If I was going to email this story out and I wasn't going to be there to tell the story, do I know what the heck my audience is going to decide from this graph if I'm not there to tell the story? Do I know how they're going to interpret this? They might have a totally different interpretation than my point of view and my intention when I put this deck together.
Can I also just say these are really ugly and inconsistent? Like you have all this different formatting and colors and
So yeah, I would say today is going to be more focused on our storytelling strategy. Tomorrow is when we're going to really talk about how we take our storytelling strategy and really bring it to life visually. Because you're absolutely correct. This is almost like an eye chart, right? Now, if we turn our attention here to our board and we layer on the signpost here. No characters, absolutely correct. We heard that. We go with some setting. Oh, then we get into some conflict. Then we go back to some setting. Then to some more conflict. Then back to some setting, and then the resolution. It's all over the place. And we have no active headlines to tell us where we are. And there's no story here. We're jumping around. There's no characters, nothing to create that
I'm
emotional
surprised you
engagement.
could actually assign a category to each side, because even like on some of them there's conflict and
Absolutely.
resolution on a single slide.
We try to kind of, force ourselves to, bucketize these, but the whole point with this is there's not really much intention, as what you're saying, around the signpost. It's kind of just all over the place.
This is something that happens to me sometimes. So should I put the title of the presentation describing the issue or describing my proposal? Because this one has margin issues. This one basically says request for changes on the compensation.
I like to create titles that kind of hint at the resolution because, you know, telling a story, I don't want to just share everything in my title because then it's like, well, I've already kind of shared the resolution of the story. Why are people going to be, you know, going to be with me? So I like to, yeah, set some context, hint at the resolution for that level set so people know why they're in the room. But I think that, and we'll see it in a second for everyone else that hasn't seen the good story, we'll see the difference between, you know, starting out that way versus just starting out on that, which just doesn't really tell you a whole lot. It doesn't give you a lot of information. Let's pivot over here. Who is our Alex Fuente for our good version? I see a lot of finger pointing. I think.
Which are 2 or 3?
Sorry, 3.
Yours.
3.
You are.
Yeah, I saw everybody point at someone different in group 3.
No, we thought we were doing team 2 next.
Oh, okay.
So we did the flow.
I don't know that I have time, unfortunately, to do both groups, so I'm. So I'll instead go to group 3 here, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
So basically, 1 year ago, we decided to change the type of personnel that was providing support from employees to contractors. This change on the sorry.
I'll get you some water here.
No, it's okay. So this change led to an unexpected increase of the late night technician requests by almost 40%. So why this is happening? So basically, we find that this increase coincides in time. Sorry, my English is not very good.
No. You're doing great.
In time with the moment that we shift from salary to contract employees, and there are several reasons for that. So also we have another problem, that is that the money that we are charging to the customers does not reflect this. So there is our customer pricing is not aligned to this technician compensation. So what do we propose to solve that? Basically, we propose a new compensation structure that will help us to recover the margin. So basically, we want to align our compensation to de-incentivize this kind of perverse trend to schedule things for late night, so we can create a more balanced compensation structure. And with this solution, we're going to achieve yearly savings of 1.3 million, and we're going to increase our margins for 94%.
Excellent. Round of applause. Nice job. Thoughts either from you, Javier, on the story that you had to tell, given 4 minutes to try to tell it?
I think the flow was much better structured, so there was I don't know, please interrupt me or add whatever you want. So there was a clear intent on the setting, on what happened, what did we change, and what was the consequence for that. We can probably personalize more on the characters, because I don't know here, I have a mental conflict, is the character the late night
technician, yep.
And their motivation of scheduling things late at night, but there is a character, there is a conflict, that is the price structure, the cost structure, the things like that, and that is not well balanced and things like that, and there is a clear resolution or proposal to solve the problem with both the solution and the benefits.
Great. I'm hearing from you, that there's a much clearer story, is what I'm hearing.
Much easier to follow as an audience. Like, I didn't have to struggle to, I mean, the points were very clear. I was impressed that he could tell the story, only having just gotten the slides. So following it as an audience was very easy. I didn't have to work.
So as far as that experience, Jen, what about this presentation in comparison to that made it easier to follow?
There was no guessing at what the problem. I mean, it led me through it. I mean, I didn't have to wonder, gosh, why are we here? He tells me right out why we're here, and then, if any background that I needed to understand of like what the problem was, he tells me what it is. So I mean, just the flow of it was very natural in terms of setting me up for why we're here. This is the problem, the key insights of the problem we're trying to solve and why, and then giving me the the solution, and wow, look at this is the benefit of the solution.
Let's go in the back.
Saying this far away, I can't read any of those slides, but I can still get the key points because of the way the focus is being drawn on the slide to a given area, like when Chavi was on slide 3 and talking about there was a dramatic increase in the, and it's pulled out, right, very visually for us, right, as opposed to the chart approach here, you can't tell where, there's no focus in it.
Right. Yeah, and part of what we are going to talk about tomorrow in terms of all, the visual aspects here is drawing that focus to the key pieces of information. Because unfortunately, as I mentioned over there, who knows what the audience is going to decide about that? And all of a sudden, you might be getting questions about Q1 because it's part of the graph versus like what you're trying to talk about, which is this increase.
I like the photographs because every once in a while it takes us out of the abstracts and grounds us in. This is a real world issue.
Great.
Here's an example of a person. Here's an example of, I can't see what that photo is, but it kind of draws you back to, this is reality. This is not just an abstract.
And these are actually intentional techniques on this. So I'm going to take these out just for a second. How does this presentation feel now? Very what? Sterile a little bit, data heavy. It's clear. It's certainly a lot clearer, but we actually call these techniques visual pauses, where if I insert these in, suddenly it separates data and pulls the audience in a little bit more and engages them. So
it brings people back to the presentation.
Yes.
Great,
because some of them, after 2 data slides, they stress out and you bring them back in.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely correct. Yeah. So I don't need this slide, right? It's not like that, people ask about slide count, like, well, how many slides should I have as part of my deck? Well, this technically counts as slide count, but you're only spending 15 seconds on this, 20 seconds on this. It's to pull them back in. It's to engage them. And the visual pause technique is something that you're able to do in your presentations. If you're like, man, I've got data, how do I break it up? How do I make it more engaging? Oh, you know what? I'm going to throw a photo on here. And, asking a question can be powerful as far as that engagement is concerned as well. And we saw it for your story, right? You started off the visual story, asking the question, draws the audience in, causes us to start thinking about the answer. So if we're worried about engagement, the visual pause technique, asking that question could be a really effective one.
I also found it interesting. I will admit, coming into this class, I was a little bit skeptical because sometimes a lot of our presentations have to be able to be digested without a presenter. And you're still able, like even if Chavi didn't present that, you can still draw the same conclusions by just looking at the presentation. So I would say I'm personally kind of pleasantly surprised.
We could get the deck without the presenter and still not miss the specific resolution recommendation.
Yeah.
Right? In this one, you could come with several different recommendations or none. Right?
Yeah. People feel like, oh, I'm not going to be there to present it, so I'm just going to dump all the information in here. And no, I'm just going to assume people read it. I'm going to assume people understand it. Where this, as you said, and it's good to hear that, is still very clear, and it's going to take somebody half of the time to understand your message. And if you keep sending decks like this, there's a good potential that someone's just going to keep ignoring your decks. Or glancing at like slide 5 or slide 6, versus this allows you to be heard, right?
One last thing, I didn't mention that during the presentation, but this is probably not to send just for the presentation. I like that it ends with a call to action that starts a debate during if this is in a presential meeting, so we start, okay, do we have your approval? And then we can kick off and start a discussion on, oh, we should do this.
Great. Call to action, and ask yourself from either your slide itself or your whole presentation, is it clear what you want the audience to know or do? If it's not clear, as it's not on that presentation, what you want me to know or do on a slide level and then a whole presentation level, you need to go back to the drawing board. What I'm hearing you say is that it's clear from the presentation what you want me to do or what you want me to know. And I think we can see, as far as all the headlines are concerned, it's a conversation we were having before. Headings, passive, not conversational, not specific, versus headlines. I mean, here alone, I don't even need this to understand the message, right? Last year, late night technician repairs increased to almost 40%. I don't even need this to understand the message, and the story tells itself. And from a presentation standpoint, and this is what I mentioned earlier today, I'm not going to tell you in terms of delivery, stand like this, you gesture like this. But from a presenter standpoint, if I emailed you this presentation, you had to present it, you could almost read the headlines and the story tells itself. I'm giving you the tools now, just on the slides itself, to really tell the story. And if, say, I get lost when I'm speaking, click, I can see the next one, and I can see a nice statement here that gets me back on track. So I've got guardrails now that are going to make it a lot easier and more comfortable for me to tell a story and connect it to each specific slide. Now, we talked about executives. How would we present this to an executive? Because, you know, as we talked about earlier, you're probably not going to have time to go through all of these slides and really build up to the story. Avi would show one there at the end. Any thoughts on, and then I'll share kind of how I think we'd present this, but any thoughts on that? And how we'd present this to executives? Probably don't have a chance to do this, you know, big reveal with all these slides.
In my experience, you have to very quickly state the problem and what you want. So, I mean, I would go, you know, one of the problem statements, and here's what we want from you.
Mm-hmm. I would
But
probably add still something about the why it's happening, no? What is the problem, why it's happening, what we propose, but very, very shortly, because sometimes if you don't provide the why, there's a problem what you propose, but
It also depends how much credibility you have with the audience. I mean, it really comes down to audience.
I like how really all of the answers here started with the audience you were going to be, that particular exec. Now, you know, generally speaking, and I'm not giving you rules or you always need to do it this way. You're going to tailor this approach for your audience, for who you're presenting to. Generally speaking, this is how I would present this to an executive. I would probably start in terms of showing my first slide. I'd probably show this because it's ultimately what I'm proposing. But I would before that quickly verbally share some context, verbally maybe share the characters, and verbally share the conflict. Very, you know, quickly to get to my main you know, key takeaway, really what I'm proposing, then I would get to the benefits. That's one approach. Or you could show this and then have that conversation with the audience. Do you want to know why we need this new compensation structure? Or do you want to know how the new compensation structure is going to benefit us? Having that conversation, then possibly they'll say, oh, you know, I got the you know, memo. I know that we've seen a large increase. Just tell me the benefits. Tell me the solution. Tell me what you're proposing. Or they might say, yeah, you know, I know what you're proposing, but I'm not really sure we need to switch our current compensation structure. And then you could say, well, in fact, you could go back and share some more context, and that we're seeing a rapid growth. So, you know, it allows you to really get out the main message very early, while verbally setting the scene, the characters and conflict, leading to this as your first slide, or starting with this, and you can pivot either to why we need this, or here's how we go about dealing with a new compensation structure.
So I really like that dialogue concept, because then you get permission to go as deeply as the audience wants you to go.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I heard a horror story from someone in one of my classes that she was presenting to an executive for the first time, and she had this intention. Like, she was rehearsing, like, oh, I'm going to spend, you know, 30 seconds on this slide. I'm going to say this way. Then I'm going to get to this next slide, and I'm going to pause here, like almost a script, really. And she said that, you know, 2 slides in, she was interrupted, and she was asked what her main recommendation was. She had to, you know, hit escape on the PowerPoint, scroll to her slide. She lost the slide, and like messages started popping up. Completely threw her off, because she was expecting to go in there and present in a very linear style. And I'm going to go from this slide to this slide, but is that ever going to happen? It's never going to happen, really. You're always going to have interruptions. So to have that dialogue allows you to be flexible. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to show you how to set up hyperlinks that will allow you to present non-linearly. So you're not having to hit escape, scroll through your slides, find the right slide, but you're able to be nimble and really go where the conversation goes. And have that dialogue versus have a monologue, because you're never going to have that monologue with a senior exec. So just to show us up here, here's our slides on our screen up here. And from a storytelling perspective, and thank you to everybody for labeling the signpost here, here's how we've classified this story. We've got our setting, some context here. You know, I think also this slide 2's got some setting in it as well, but we're introducing then our characters in slide 2. We've got the full screen photo of our characters there in slide 3. Still some setting. Then we move into the conflict. Conflict escalates, and we arrive on our big idea. That's our one key takeaway. I am gonna talk about that more when we get into module 3 on how we be strategic about coming up with that. Then we move into the resolution, and then we button it again here with our main big idea, because that again is our one key takeaway. So bringing that back in creates some focus.
slightly different.
Slightly different, you know, like this, you know, I think you did a good job putting it together. The idea here is now we finally have this story here. We're finally sharing a story with the audience. It's not this like scattered, you know, deck that feels like it was pulled together from different parts and no one can really share the main key story. So thoughts, comments, any other comments to make or questions of seeing these good versus bad stories side by side? You know, we're obviously trying to create presentations that are out in the world. Like this is not a terrible presentation. This is what we see out there. But I think we've seen the opportunity to really make it that much more effective. All right, everybody have a seat for me. In rounding out Module 1, talking about the power of visual storytelling, I mean, hopefully we can see that it's the combination of data and story that really captures our attention and can ultimately move people to action. It's not like that story is full of data. It's the same data that we have here on these slides, but we have a story here as well. We have that combination. Again, 22 times more likely to remember that fact if we wrap it in a story. So it is the combination of these two that will allow us to cut through the noise and engage our audience. Any final questions or comments around Module 1, the power of storytelling? All right, well, here in a moment, we are going to get into Module 2, which is all about audience and about examining audience first. In Module 2, I'm going to send you an email where you're going to use the Visual Story Planner. So that's the point of the training where we'll start working on our computers. So we'll have a 10-minute break right now. Hopefully time for you to maybe grab a computer if you're at your desk so you can work in it. It's down there, perfect. So great, all right, 10-minute break. Let's say at 11:25, we'll begin our next module.